Today, my guest is Deidre Bloomquist, and she is a functional nutritionist, and she's the founder of Always Growing Wellness. Today, we're going to be talking about her story, about how she went from the corporate world, abandoned everything at 23 years old, to dive into her mission and her passion of helping others with their health. And this was not an easy feat for her. And I imagine that many of you out there so want to leave the corporate environment, leave the stability, and do something that you're really passionate about. So I am very excited to dive into this with her. And since she made this jump, she has been incredibly successful. She specializes in reversing infertility by looking at the toxic burden on the body and helping restore the body's ability to conceive. She is the best-selling author of Toxic Infertility: Detoxification Solutions to Improve Natural Fertility. And it is my pleasure to introduce Deidre Bloomquist. Well, hello, Deidre.
Hello. I'm so excited to be sitting down and chatting with you today.
I can't wait to dive into your story. And you know, what's so amazing is I was sitting down just reading, you could tell me just little bullet points, and I was like, oh my gosh, I've been there. Like, so many people have been there and out of fear have not done what you did. Not only did you do it, which I promise you, everyone, we're going to talk about it, but not only did you do it, you did it at 23 years old. And I look back, I don't know about any of you all, but 23 was a long time ago for me. and granted, I was with the man that I'm still with now. We weren't married yet, but I look at, like, did I really fully know at 23 what I wanted to do? Did I know I would become an entrepreneur when I was 23 years old? No, I was all about, let's get the job, let's get money in the bank, let's get married, let's figure out what I'm going to be when I grow up. I was still trying to figure out who I was going to be when I grow up at 23 years old. So I would like to start by just jumping into this decision that you made at freaking 23. And let's just unpack it from there, because I want to dive into the emotions, the fear. There must have been so much going through your head at the time. So tell everyone, what did you do at 23 years old that nobody else really does?
Yeah. So when I was 23, I was working in the oil and gas industry. And I had never really intended to be in oil and gas, but I landed this great job, it had originally started through a temp agency where I had started as a receptionist.
Okay.
And then I ended up becoming the executive assistant to the vice president of the company. And pretty soon he realized that I knew a lot more than an executive assistant does typically. And so I became a financial analyst. And so I was doing a lot of work with finances.
Wait, hold up. So
Yeah.
Was there a degree going into this, knowing financial analytics, or that's just something you were like, wow, I really love numbers? I want to tell you, as a business owner, that's my least favorite part is the financial analysis. I'm like, my God, it's a day I have to do my numbers. So this was something that just was natural to you, or?
Yeah. Yep. So I actually went to college for journalism. I have a degree in journalism. And I had originally, when I went to college, wanted to go pre-med and go to medical school. And I just realized when I was doing that, was like, I just don't know if this is the right fit for me. And I always loved writing. I'm a creative person. And so I ended up going to school for journalism. But because of that pre-med work, as you very well know, like, there's a lot of math involved. There's a lot of science and things. And so I was always very good at those things. But I didn't have any formal training. Everything that I did as a financial analyst was like self-taught, learning from people in the industry, and just being able to put it together, essentially.
Did you, and sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I got to unpack just this part and then we'll keep going. So, I mean, I understand in some respects, because when I was in my 20s, I had been a business owner as a model since I was 12. Like, I had been paying taxes since I was 12, and I understood how to mold into an environment and how to take risks in those environments and things like that. That's not a common thing for somebody at that age. So do you remember, like, when they said, hey, by the way, you're now moving up to this role, do you remember feeling like a rejection or a pullback, like, oh my God, I'm not good enough? Or were you just like, heck yeah, man, I'm going to just pretend my way through this? Like, what did you do?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of insecurity there where I just wasn't sure that it like made sense more than anything. And like, I've always been a go-getter. Like, if you give me a task and it's a challenge for me, I will figure it out. And so when I was given this role, it actually changed companies where I was doing a lot of financial work. And one of the women that I was working with had moved to a different company, and she brought me with her and was like, I want you to come and help and like be part of our very small financial team. And it was a huge step up at that point in time. So it was very challenging to kind of like wrap my head around and just be like totally new and know very little in that space.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. So you move to this thing, you start working, I'm assuming a lot.
Yes, a lot. Yes.
And you have the energy at 23 to, work all the time and burn yourself out easily, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. So what happened?
Yeah. So, like at that point in time, to your point, I was getting into the office at like 6, 7 a.m. and being in there until 6, 7 p.m. Just all day through.
Was this self-inflicted or is that what they expected?
I think it was a little bit of both. In honestly, a little bit of both. It was definitely expected, especially during busy seasons, and then it was also self-inflicted of like, I want to show up the way in the best way possible. So I ended up getting a pap smear done at that point in time, like we all do, and it came back abnormal. And like most people, I think at that point in time feel like, what does this mean, right? And everything that my doctor was telling me at that point in time was like, this could be cancerous and we're going to do more testing to figure out what's happening here. And I think I had kind of like a quarter life crisis at that point in time where I was like, what am I doing? Like, if I do have cancer, I don't want to be doing what I'm doing on a daily basis. This is not how I want to live my life. And one of the things that I had started doing when I took a corporate role, because it was never my intention, it was always to pay the bills, was I had made an agreement with myself to start doing more of the things that I really enjoyed doing. So I started teaching yoga, and I was teaching CrossFit, and I was learning about nutrition, and I was doing all of these things in the evenings and on the weekends and earning some very like minimal side income doing that. And so when I got that diagnosis and was going through the process of having further testing done, I just realized I didn't want to be doing that. That's not how I wanted to live my life. And so within a week of having that happen, before I'd even gone to get the further testing done, I put in my 2 weeks notice and quit my job on the spot and was like, I'm going to figure it out from here. I want to figure out what I really want to do with my life.
Oh, could you imagine? Like, okay, so how many people out there listening are like, I so want to quit my job. And yet they're 50, 60, still haven't quit their job. And I do think the pandemic brought on a lot of self-reflection on this. I think one, on how do we want to spend our time? Two, life is precious. Like, do I really want to be doing what I'm doing? And I think there's a lot of people going through that right now. And for me to make, I was always an entrepreneur. Obviously, I was thrown into it when I was a kid. But through my 20s, I didn't think about that. Even when I went to medical school, it was like, well, what am I going to do when I get out? Well, I'm going to start my business. I didn't really make like the full decision to be like, I'm going to do what I really want to do until my 40s, right? It took me that long to get to that point where I was like, I don't care what other people think. I don't care what their opinions are. I'm just going to do what I want to do. And in your 20s, that's really difficult because you are very impressionist, or like you think everything is like, what are people going to think, right? I think when you wrote in, you said your family and your boyfriend thought you were nuts.
Yes.
So first of all, I want to commend you for like jumping in on what you believed in. And I'm curious, I don't want to get too personal, but I'm really curious. Like, this is an interesting thing for me. Were you raised in an environment where it was like, grab your, like put your big girl pants on and just freaking do it? Or is this something that you just have had since you were little? Like, what were you like when you were 2 or 4?
Yeah. Like I think growing up, my parents were always very supportive of like, you can do whatever you want to do and you can achieve anything. But in the position that I was in, being in my early 20s and basically being set up for the rest of my life. Like I was making 6 figures at 23 years old, which was like, this could be huge for you by the time you are ready to retire. I got a lot of pushback and it was really scary because I was basically throwing it all away, right? Yeah. Where my parents were very unhappy. They were like, please don't quit your job. Like, you cannot do this, because I didn't have a plan going forward. I had an idea of what I wanted to do, but I didn't have a solid plan, and it was very unknown. And growing up, My parents always wanted me to go to college. My mom, I'm the first in my family to ever go to college. And so, you know, it was a very big deal for me to go and then to have like this awesome career and really be like checking that box, you know, like that was the whole point. Go to college, get this wonderful corporate job, be able to like live this big fancy life. And then to not want to do that was, I think, really jarring for them. But, you know, I had a boyfriend at the time who was like, that is crazy. Why would you do that? Like, you can't just, you're never going to be able to be an entrepreneur. And I was like, watch me. I think I can do this.
It's like that new Nike commercial out that's like, you can't do it, go freaking do it. Like I'm kind of with you on that, like that rebellion. I don't know if you guys can hear my dog snoring in the background, but if you hear snoring, that's me.
That's okay.
It's full on snoring. I love that because I don't know. I sometimes wonder, like, are people born to be entrepreneurs? Is it something you learn? I mean, you and I have had the pleasure of meeting many entrepreneurs. And even from this show, interviewing different entrepreneurs, which is a large majority of the people I interview, the personalities are all very different. I do find that there is a common similarity in seeing a future vision. Mm-hmm. Whether you know how to get there or not is like, I think a lot of people have this idea that if you have this vision, you automatically, if you're an entrepreneur, you're supposed to know how to get there. And one of the things I've learned personally about being an entrepreneur is you have no freaking idea how to get there most of the time. You just know where you're trying to go. And so you test and you back up and you test again and you back up and you're like, okay, is this aligning with my vision? And you have to be a very strong visionary to figure out where you're trying to go. Did the yoga and such that you were doing at that age kind of help you get into that, I guess, that Zen parasympathetic, I have a vision zone?
Yeah, I mean, I think it did. I think like the yoga and everything was really influential for me of figuring out like where I wanted to go with things and what I wanted my life to look like and what I wanted to really hold as core values in my life. And so I think that's something that has definitely stuck with me over the years. And it doesn't mean that like, there haven't still been more times where I'm like, I'm just going to jump in with all feet and see what happens here because I don't know where this is going. But being able to constantly assess where I'm at in my life and what's aligned and what's not aligned and moving towards that slowly over time so that it's just improving, you know, as we move through the years. And
being willing to trust your intuition, which we've been trained not to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? We've been trained to trust other people's, you know, people spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on coaches and staff and whatnot to tell them what to do. Mm-hmm. And I think those are tools. They can give you the tools. And I think that's incredibly valuable, right? But if in your heart of heart, you don't have that clear vision or that mission of what you're trying to accomplish or seeing where you're trying to go, you can, you know, read as many books as you want and hire as many people, but you'll never actually get there. So what did you start building at that time?
Yeah. So I remember the day that I gave my notice to my corporate job. I gave the notice to my boss. And I had been looking at different health coaching and nutrition certification programs. And I literally went out to my car and called them and enrolled on the spot. And so I knew kind of what I wanted, where I wanted to go with everything. And I just had to figure out how to make it work. So I applied to be a trainer at a CrossFit gym who would let me also do nutrition coaching at the same time and build out a program. And I had to make a whole lot of changes from like a lifestyle perspective too. Like I was going from like having a very significant income to none, basically, and very little savings because let's be real, I was in my early 20s and savings was not on my radar or my concern list in any way. So, you know, I had to I sold a lot of my personal belongings. I worked a lot of odd jobs in addition to focusing on what I was building from a business perspective. So like I did a lot of I worked for a flower shop at one point. I went back and was doing like babysitting and nannying on the side. I would do anything. I was doing a lot of freelance writing. I was doing a lot of transcription. Like I was using the skill set that I had to be able to make the income to help support what I was building in the meantime so that I could get it to the place where it was, you know, sustainable as an income source, but it didn't happen overnight. It took way longer than it probably should have.
Hold up. Longer than it should have. I don't know. I mean, how long did it take?
I think to get to the point where it was like really comfortable, it probably took me like 2 or 3 years.
Okay, that is
ultimately.
not long at all. I think the average, like, I don't even know if it's an average anymore, but I know like everyone says at least 8 years.
Yeah.
I mean, of just building and growing and becoming
Totally.
who you are and the message and what you serve. So, I mean, like to do that in 2 to 3 years is freaking amazing. So take a moment. That's freaking amazing.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so I had a question along the way there.
Yeah.
How hard was it to sell your belongings?
Oh, it was hard, and it was also easy for me because it was like I was looking at things that I wasn't using. And the part of why I wanted to do this was things weren't really what mattered to me. Like having a fancy car didn't really matter to me. So I like sold my car and got a different car, right? And that was totally fine with me. And having personal belongings that were like things that I used every once in a while, but weren't like something I was using daily, or they weren't very valuable to me in that season, was okay for me to get rid of. And it was okay with me to have to like, really grind to be able to make the income, to be able to pay my rent and buy groceries and do those things and kind of go back to what I think a lot of us feel like are those college days. But I was doing it in a way that made sense for me so that I could structure my days to look the way I wanted to without feeling like I was just selling my soul essentially to make an income.
Well, we hang on to so much. I won't call it baggage. I mean, I've lost my mom, my dad, my grandparents, just lost my stepdad. And every single time I was the executor of the estate or the power of attorney or whatever, and I had to go and clean out all their stuff. I had to clean out all these houses, and the amount of stuff that we accumulate. And what I really found myself attached to was really not the things at all, or it was the memory, right? So like there was this little table in my mom's house. This was just last August, right? Because when my mom died, just to preface, my mom died almost 9 years ago. And my stepdad wouldn't let me clean the house out. He was like, no, I'm keeping all her stuff. All her clothes were still there. So when he died in August, I walked in and it was like my mom lived there. And I purposely stayed out of the house for pretty much 8 years because I didn't want to walk in there and start to go through this process at that time, right? I wasn't ready to do it, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
So he passes and now I have this house and it's full of his stuff and her stuff. Well, his stuff was easy. I was like, just get rid of it, right? Because it didn't mean anything to me. But I felt like I had to go through every single thing of hers because I had no idea what I was going to want to keep or not. And there was this beat up old table. I mean, literally like Goodwill wouldn't even take it. The thing was disgusting. And it was in the garage. Obviously, I'm not going to bring it home, right? Because what am I going to do with it? Like it was like falling apart and it was like stained and whatever. And I kept walking by it and I kept thinking, I got to take that home. And I was like, why am I so attached to this freaking table? It's ugly. Well, I had this guinea pig named Punky when I was a kid, and my mom and dad divorced, and we moved out on our own, and I was an only child, and Punky was my friend, okay? So, like, after school every day, I'd come home. I trained Punky. You guys are going to laugh at me. It's fine. You can laugh at me all you want. But I trained Punky to use a litter box. Like, Punky would come out. I'd play with my dolls, and Punky would walk around. And the reason I called her Punky was for Punky Brewster, and her hair was all over the place. Like, she looked like a rat. I don't know. And she would go use a litter box and she would play with my dolls with me and whatever. And I loved this guinea pig. And we bought a house. The first house, my mom made enough money, saved up as a single mom to buy a house. And it was our first house after living in apartments and apartments. And we put Punky on this table, her cage on this table, right smack in the middle of the living room. And every day I walked past it and, Punky was there. And as I got older, I didn't want to play with Punky so much, right? But Punky was in my space. I think the average life of a guinea pig is like 2 years or something. I think like at most the average life is maybe they live 4. I'm not kidding. Punky lived for 9.5 years, this guinea pig, on this table in our house. And it took me a while because I had suppressed that, but I had this like desire to take this table with me, and it was all I could do to come against it. And that's what I think of when I saw that you sold all your stuff. I'm like, I think we get these emotional attachments, and when you work in the work that you and I do, we learn that it's the emotion that we're attached to. It's the emotion that keeps us from moving forward, that holds pain in our body or hold blocks in our body, or that doesn't let us move forward. It's not the thing, right? It's not the job. It's not the money. It's not the relationship. It's not all the thing that we perceive as lack or the things that we have. It's about the emotion that's attached to that thing. And are we willing to connect with that emotion and therefore let the thing go? And it sounds like you had a very strong maturity at that time to be able to do that. As mature as I was, like here I am at freaking almost 49 years old looking at some beat up old table that my guinea pig used to sit on and like having a serious debate with myself whether or not I should bring it home.
Yeah.
Right?
No.
Like,
No,
so
totally.
it's amazing. Have you had to do that multiple times throughout your life where you've now had to sell things off and kind of start over? Or was that like the moment of now building the career and it's been all...
That, I think that was the most significant time that's ever happened, where I had to really just take inventory of the things that were happening in my life and like what I had, and really thinking about like what it meant to have wealth ultimately. And this is something that I think about a lot even still. I have a small child. He's 4 years old, and the way that I'm thinking about it since having him has changed so much in terms of like, what does it mean to have wealth and have things, and like knowing that at this point in my life, what wealth looks like is being able to structure my days to spend time with him and being able to have the life that I want and be able to like travel and give him these experiences and those things, rather than it being material things at the end of the day. And I think it really started then, seeing that it just wasn't the life that I wanted to live. And it didn't really matter to me if I had like everything that anybody could ever want, if it didn't mean that I was happy when I went to sleep at night, or if I woke up feeling excited about the day, or if I just felt totally burned out and had health issues that were resulting from it, of course, too.
Yeah, what did you experience through burnout? I mean, obviously we had that pap smear. Did it turn into cancer, or
No.
what? Talk about your health through this whole process as you figure this out.
Yeah. So it came back and it was totally clear. So there was nothing cancerous involved. And I continued to get abnormal paps for a number of years. And at some point I was just like, I'm not going to worry about this. I'm not going to keep stressing myself over this on on annual basis. Right. And I threw myself into what I was doing as a trainer and building my business. And so I think I found a new level or a different type of burnout, essentially, because what that ultimately shifted into was I was probably, like most people who build businesses, realized, I was working a lot in a corporate job. I was probably working even more building my own business, right? Yeah. And that was okay, because it was what I wanted to be doing, and it was fulfilling, and I was really enjoying it. But I was working a lot of hours. So, like when you're working in a gym setting, gyms open and start at like 5 a.m. and they go until 8 p.m. at night, and there's things that are happening all throughout the day. And so I think I really got to the point where I was experiencing a lot of adrenal burnout and just being exhausted all the time. I was living on coffee. Like, I love espresso, and was like drinking espresso at 6, 7 o'clock at night, and then be able to go to sleep immediately after. And I was like, this is not good that my body can just withstand this, So it was all over the place. And I think as everything started to stabilize, I was then able to take a step back again and reassess, like, how do I structure this in a way that doesn't have to be the burnout and grind? And I know that this is something that a lot of entrepreneurs really struggle with, whether you're, going after your own corporate dream or you're building your own thing, is how do I do things in a way that is sustainable long term and isn't going to feel like I'm burning myself out month after month and year after year, so that I can do this long term, versus it being something that is like a short fizzle out.
Well, I think it's more than just entrepreneurs. I mean, a mom in general. I look at how many different things, it's like between everything I do when I wake up in the morning, actually scheduling in the self-care for me, making sure I go to dance class, making sure I, wake up and have my routine in the morning where I do my meditations and I do my, vision statements, and I like sit in calm and I don't run to my phone to take care of patients and things like that, and setting those boundaries. I think everyone can relate to that. And I'm not ruling out the dads, okay? Because like dads are there too, right? Or men. I think it is really important. And unfortunately, a lot of the times it takes a big health scare for us to be like, oh my God, we have to take care of ourselves, right? Especially if you're a very driven person and that little toddler that would do whatever you needed to do to get through your day, I have one of those right now. Well, he's 13 now, and it's like,
Same, but different.
Yeah. And I'm like, all right, well, you're going to be very successful in life because you won't let anyone bowl you over. See how I turned that into a gratitude statement? So like, you could look at it and you're like, oh my God, my teenager's driving me crazy. Oh my God, all they do is talk back. Oh my God, all I do is this and that. Oh my God, I got to do something. And you try to take control of the situation. Or you can flip it and be like, oh, well, they're going to be a fantastic business owner someday. Like, look at them go. Look at them assert themselves. How great is that? And then look at them through the lens of love and gratitude. And not only does that lift them up and support them to be themselves, I mean, granted, you have boundaries. They can't do something wrong, but also lifts you and your frequency up. So let's talk a little bit about control.
Yeah.
Are you like me, a recovering control perfectionist freak? Like, are you learning how to get out of that? Or like, where are you at with the concept of control now that you have a little boy?
Yeah, little boy. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I am in recovery, because, I started really building my team. So right now I have a team of 8 other practitioners who work with clients, and I'm no longer working with clients directly, but it took me a while to get there. And the first point of letting go of that control was when I found out I was pregnant. I think between the time I found out I was pregnant and I started interviewing to hire on my team was like 2 weeks. I was like, I'm not going to be able to do this by myself here very shortly, especially at the speed at which I'm currently doing it. And so I started building my team and, of course, realized very quickly, like, nobody does everything the way that you do it. And I'm still working on letting go of those things. Like, the team is still growing, and I know that there's a lot of things that are on my plate that don't need to be. But when my son was really little, when he was probably up until like one and a half, he's always home with me. So the way that my schedule typically works is I work basically 1.5 days a week where I have consolidated work time where he's not with me, and then he's with me the rest of the week, ultimately. So I was working from home with him as a baby for 1.5 years and was just burning both ends of the candle, essentially. And was finding that there was just this new iteration of how can I burn myself out and not let go of control, that somebody else can do some of these things that I'm doing right now. Yeah. And really coming to grips with, like, this is impacting my health, as it typically does, as the red flag of I can't just keep doing the same thing that I have been doing. It might have got me to this point, but it's not getting me where I'm going, ultimately. And having to let go of that control and really trust that other people can do what I do. And I think what I have found over time too is there are people who can do it better than I can do it if I just can surrender it to them in the first place.
That point you made where you said, I've done it to this point. It served me up until this point, but now I'm going here and I need to do it different. And I want everyone to listen to that statement and think about it for a minute, because we learn as we go, right? We learn these things, these survival instincts. I was raised as a survivor. Only child, thrown into a business as an infant through my entire life. My parents divorced, off working. My mom would travel and go do photo shoots. My dad was, whatever he was doing at the time, he was always traveling. I was home alone a lot. I had to learn how to survive. I learned how to figure it out. And that served me really well until a certain point. And then it was like, okay, this control and this need to survive all the time is actually taking me down, because my brain is going back into this stress response. I was always in a stress loop, and I'm the adrenal whisperer, for God's sakes. Like, I treat adrenal glands. And it wasn't until being in practice for over 10 years before I was like, oh my God, I treat people and tell people all the time to address their stress response. And here I am still controlling the things that are not in my control. And that served me really well. And the point being that one of the things that I say to myself almost every day now as I wake up, and I'm like, well, that served me really well. I'm so grateful for my ability to be resilient and for my ability to survive. But now where I'm trying to go requires me to be more vulnerable, requires me to let things go, requires me to delegate them. And that's where the show was even bred out of, is like, who's the real Tricia now that doesn't have to survive all the time? It's okay to say, like, hey, I didn't do this right. Or I did at the time, but now it isn't, right? And really looking at how can we get groups of people together as a community and realize that no matter what you do with your life, no matter what age you are, no matter what your circumstances are, we've all had this need to survive. Yeah. And I think in the more recent times, and perhaps you agree or have stuff to add on this, in the more recent times, even in the last 5 years, I think we're seeing that more and more and more. Like, oh my gosh, we have been surviving. We have been responding to everyone else's stimuli and totally losing this. Yeah. Right here, this beautiful thing, this heart, this beautiful, loving, gratitude-filled heart that connects us to somebody else emotionally, right? Yeah. We're all losing it. We're losing that communication with our emotions. And I want to weave this into fertility a little bit, because I would imagine, just from my experience, that's part of the thing that's also impacting people's fertility is disconnection with their mind and body, or this idea that they have to fight to get pregnant. They have to fight to do this. They have to do all the things. They have to be in control of it. They have to do it when they want it at this time. And if it doesn't happen on this schedule, they're failures. And I'm just extrapolating. I don't know. I want to pass this to you. Yeah. But that's what I would imagine happens in what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's this big thing that happens too when you start to relinquish that control, where it really does not feel comfortable and you do not feel safe. And it's hard to work through that, especially I think in our culture that really rewards people for being go, 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 or for always being chasing after something. You know, for years I had people and colleagues who were looking at me and saying, I don't know how you do all the things you do. And like, that is not a compliment for me. I want it to be like, you're doing all of these big things and it's amazing that you are taking care of yourself as well. And, you know, to your point, I do see this a lot with women in infertility. It looks, there's a couple ways that it typically presents. It's usually they get pregnant, they get married, then they want to get pregnant right away. And when it doesn't happen, it's very easy to be like, what's wrong with me? What's wrong here? And try to control the entire situation. Or they maybe get pregnant very easily the first time, and then they have a very clear idea of what they want the spacing of their children to look like between siblings. Right?
Yes. I have a friend like that. She's like, I'm going to have a child at 25 and another one at 27, and I'm going to have my perfect job at 28. Yes. And it's all going to all line up, and I'm going to be doing this or that. And if she's listening, she'll laugh. And of course, she's learned to let that go since then. But yes, okay, I hear you. Yes.
And it's hard because I think sometimes as we're growing up, it really feels like there's this checklist of things that we're supposed to achieve. And we're like, got it, did it, next. And, you know, one of the things that I have learned and really embraced while becoming a mother is motherhood is the biggest lesson in surrender that you will ever experience, because guess what? You have no control over anything.
Nothing. The only checklist you can have is, did I shower today? Did I take a few deep breaths? You know, did I actually sleep last night? Like you can't. No. Yeah.
And so I think, you know, one of the conversations that we're typically having with women in the preconception and fertility phase of things, because they don't know that yet, especially if you're not a mom yet, is you don't know this yet, but you're going to have to let go of this control. And so the sooner that we can do that and release you from feeling like you are not good enough, or that you're not doing enough, or that you need to be doing more, and control every step of this process, is not only going to likely help you conceive, but it's also going to make that transition into motherhood a lot more smooth as well. Because I think, you know, I experienced this as a mom where I had a baby and I had all of these big grand plans, and there's this big conflict typically between our ambitions of who we are before we're moms, and then you become a mom and you're like, oh, joke's on me because this is different now, right? And so I think being able to grapple with that and have some type of expectation of that leading into becoming a mom ahead of time just sets women up for success. You know, like one of the big things that we talk about in our practice is, I want to help couples get pregnant. I want women to have the babies that they want to have. And I want to make sure that they are set up for motherhood and that they have healthy motherhoods and that we have healthy children as well. And that starts in the preconception phase. And a big part of that is often letting go of control.
Yeah, I mean, the name of the show is What Am I Modeling? Well, what's the best way to raise your children? It's to model behavior. And I also find that when you are a mom, and let's say your kid is having a hard time, like they come home from school and they say, I'm being bullied, or I'm not good enough, or whatever, what do? You come at them with love and say, yes, you are, buddy. You are amazing. Like, don't let these other people impact you. But when we come home and say, I'm not good enough, I can't do this, we don't give ourselves that same grace or love. We just we're like, yeah, you suck. Like we look at ourselves in the mirror and say, look at our body. It's so ugly since we've had a baby. Or we don't, since I've had children, I can't do this or that. And we wouldn't treat our kids with that same outlook, or even someone that we truly love, a sibling or a parent or whatever. We would give them the advice and the support of love. And we don't give that to ourselves. And I love that you're working on that preconception, because the teacher to our children is our behavior. Mm-hmm. It's not what we say, right? I mean, I gave myself a thumbs up. I love it when I do fun stuff like that. It's not what we say necessarily, or even the parenting advice. I mean, when my kids were born, I used a book called The Baby Whisperer, which I loved because it was about like learning how they're trying to communicate with you and setting them on a schedule for them. I mean, obviously it's within your schedule, but you're honoring their process within your schedule, because guess what? My schedule did matter at the time. I was in medical school when I had my first kid, right? And in an early practice during my second. But what we're modeling, the way that we react to things, I think is what we're teaching them more than anything. When we look at ourselves in the mirror and say, mom's important, mom matters. Mom goes to the gym. Well, why are you leaving, mom? Well, because mom has to take care of herself. Like, it's important to be strong. Putting food on the table, that's good for them out of the get-go, right? Teaching them nutrition by being, eating good nutrition yourself. My kids right now are teenagers. So like, if they could eat Domino's pizza every day, they would. Like, and that's just the way it is. And here's the thing. On Friday night, I ordered them Domino's pizza because they had like a plan with themselves to watch this movie. And my husband and I had this really healthy dinner planned, and we wanted to spend time together. And we were like, well, okay. So I was like, okay, I can go out of my way and go to the grocery store, make a whole new meal for them. Or I could just give in this time and let go and be like, you know what? Go ahead and have your Domino's pizza right now, because they have to learn how to make those decisions for themselves. They have to learn that when they're in college, sometimes they will eat crap, right? It doesn't mean they're bad, but they can learn, okay, I didn't feel as good after that versus this. And mom and dad ate healthy meals. And what's funny is my 16-year-old is starting to eat salad. I don't know where, just out of nowhere. And I'm like, the other day, literally, I did a double take in the kitchen. I was like, what are you having for lunch? And he's like, salad. I'm like, what? And he's like, salad. Salad's good for you. And I was like, okay. Mm-hmm. Weirdest thing.
Yep.
I never forced him to eat the salad, but I eat salad all the time, right? And so I think keeping that in mind and setting that up preconception is really important. And do you have a program that does that for people? Is that like you have like a preconception phase and then like trying to, like, how does that work?
Yeah, so we do preconception and actively trying to conceive roughly together, essentially. So we have a lot of women who we work with and couples who have been diagnosed with unexplained infertility, and they come in and they're like, I want to get pregnant immediately. And we work with them through that. But we also are having more and more women come in who are like just getting married, or they want to have kids in a year or two. And so they're thinking ahead of like, how do I set myself up for success to be able to conceive easily when the time is right. And I think what we're seeing over time too is the women who can come in and really focus on the perspective being, how do I support myself and how do I make sure that my health is in as best a spot possible, and let go of that outcome of I want to conceive by this date, or, we work with women in 6-month time intervals. And so it being like, I want to conceive by the end of 6 months sort of thing. When we can let go of that and stop doing the pregnancy test every month and be waiting in those 2 weeks, and just like let life unfold, those are the women that conceive very easily. And they're so shocked. They're like, it was by accident. We weren't even trying, or it was like the very first time we tried, because they've let go of that outcome and they've really started to focus on themselves and what they're putting in their body and on their body and how they're treating themselves. And it makes a huge difference in the long run.
We do have to trust. Right? We don't have control over the universe or the timing. Mm-hmm. We just don't. And the only thing we have control over is our actions. And I think a lot of people say, well, that means I can take control of the pregnancy test. I can take control of this or that. Well, what if it's not your time? What if that baby isn't ready to come down yet? What if it's sitting up there still and like, no, I'm waiting until you're 35. But all right, you just keep trying if you want. I mean, I had 2 friends in the past couple of years in their mid 40s get pregnant. Mm-hmm. They didn't think they could. They weren't trying, mind you. they didn't think they could because the doctor said, well, you're over 40. You're not going to get pregnant. I'm like, do you have a menstrual cycle? Yes. I'm like, you can get pregnant. You know, I think we're shifting to having children later in life often. And that's okay.
Yep.
You know, but at what point do we trust? Do you have certain self-care rituals that you do yourself now? And are you planning to have more children? Or are you trusting?
You know, I don't know the answer. I think we're open to it, but we have a child that sounds a little bit like yours, who is going to be a tough child, but an amazing adult one day. So that is a challenge in and of itself. But we're open to it. We've always been open to it. And it's just one of the things where it just hasn't seemed like the timing's right more than anything. And I don't feel very rushed on the whole situation either.
Great.
In terms of like what I do from a self-care perspective, and I think it looks different for everybody, but I think one of the big things that I changed this year in particular that's been really impactful is I am not a morning person. And I have known this forever. And yet I was booking calls for myself to start at like 9 a.m. and I would dread it every single time. And from my perspective, I'm like, I own this whole practice. Why am I doing anything that I don't like when I can't show up as my best self? And so I have changed my schedule to allow time in the mornings for myself to have a slow morning and to do the things that are like more creative, or for me to like work on things that don't get to get done in the rest of the day ultimately, and start my calls a little bit later, which just means that I can then show up and have my brain fully on, but also just means that everything is so much more productive throughout the day without me feeling stressed about it. So I think that's been one of the biggest things. The other thing I feel like I needed to let go of, because I came from this very fitness oriented world, is to let go of that looking perfect as well. You know, because I was somebody who was doing a lot physically, and I'm a very outdoorsy person, and I love hiking, and I was able to do all of these things prior to becoming a mom, and it looked very different. And it's not like those things don't happen now, but rather than holding myself to the previous standard and being upset because I wasn't able to do those things, and instead just say like, as long as I'm moving my body and I feel good, that's what matters at the end of the day, and stop letting go of it needs to be this many times a week, and it needs to be this long, and it needs to look like this. It can be very different now, and it just means that I get to give myself some more grace through this season, knowing that it doesn't have to be forever. It could change in a week if I wanted it to.
And what is perfect really?
Yeah.
From the retired fashion model, what is perfect? Like, I don't know. I still don't know. You know, there were times that I did campaigns that were huge campaigns where someone probably looked at the ad and was like, wow, she's perfect. And on the inside, I was like, I am ugly. I don't love who I am. I feel out of place. The person next to me is perfect. The model I'm next to is the one that's perfect, not me, right? Like, we go through our entire lives, I know particularly as women, putting the standard on ourselves to look a certain way, but that definition of what is beautiful actually is not defined. I think back when I first started modeling, one of the reasons they signed me is they said, well, you have the features that are considered beautiful. You have the big forehead, you have the long neck, you have the big eyes, you're 6 feet tall, you are what you're supposed to be. Well, what's great about the modeling industry since then is it's changed. Now there's all sorts of different features being involved. Some of the most famous models in the world could walk down the street and you actually wouldn't know they're a model because they've changed those features so much. The definition of what is perfect has changed, yet we're still holding ourselves to a standard of what perfect was for us freaking 30 years ago. And I think that's a big one for people to let go to. I had a really hard time being pregnant because of that. I really, really had a hard time with it. I didn't like seeing the scale go up. And I didn't like being on the scale. I'd go to get, and say, oh, your baby's perfect. It's growing perfectly great, heartbeat, whatever. I mean, Cameron was huge, right? Like, he was born 9 pounds. And I did it naturally, by the way. Woo-hoo. Anyway, he in a tub in my kitchen, like a crazy person. But he was perfect. And he was perfect as he was. But the whole entire time I was like, oh, I don't like this weight I'm gaining. Oh, I don't like how I feel. How fast can I lose the weight when he's born? I mean, I was like out the door walking every day. I was trying to, get into things. And it's like, God, all that time I wasted, I could have just sat there and looked at my beautiful baby. Yeah. So those are some of the things that I don't want to say regret, but some of the things that I've learned over time where it's like, we're trying to achieve something that we can't achieve, and letting go of that. And that doesn't mean, ladies, to not take care of yourself or, show up as your best self or not go to the gym. It's not an excuse to sit on the couch and eat potato chips. But what it is saying that I honor who I am now and what my body is now and what it's been through. And now, I'm going to be 49 in a couple months. And for me, I'm more interested in, am I going to be able to climb up a ladder? Am I going to be able to stay in my dance classes till I'm 95? Because I'm not leaving. I'm continuing to go. And I will continue to go and dance with the teenagers as long as I can physically dance with the teenagers. That's just what I'm going to do. So yeah, I really love that you brought that up.
Yeah. And to your point too, I think, so I really struggled while I was pregnant too, because I had this idea of what being a mom was supposed to look like and how it has been modeled, right? And I was like, I don't want it to look like that. I don't want to do that. And so a big part of what I did was had to really re-envision, what do I want this to look like for me? And how do I build that? Because in a lot of places it does not exist, right? Of it's crazy to a lot of people that my little boy's never been in a daycare. We've never really done babysitting. He's always with me or dad, basically, outside of date nights, right? And so it's never been something that I've done for the sake of my work sort of thing. And really trying to accept that, but also understand that there are times where he's on calls with me and trying not to apologize for him being there of this is what I want this to look like ultimately long term. And kind of how this whole conversation started is being the visionary on that of this is what I want this to look like. I don't know how we're going to do it. There's not really a clear laid path or framework for how I'm supposed to do that. But if I can envision it, I can probably make it happen. And it's going to be a little bumpy throughout the way, but it can certainly be done.
That's a great ending message right there. Create your vision of where you're trying to go, whatever that may be for you as a parent, in your career, as a spouse, as a human. Where do you see yourself in your ideal day? Do you want to be outside hiking every day? Do you want to be going to the gym? Do you want to be sitting and having coffee in the morning by yourself and reading a book? Do you want to have your child with you all the time? Do you not? No judgment. What do you want your life to be? And then those little things that are holding you back, the little things, the past that keeps calling you back over here, figure out how you can modify them to go this direction, because this has served you up to this point. And now, where do you want to go? And your child is only going to benefit for that. So that's a fantastic thing. Now, you have a free gift for people.
I do, yes.
Yes, I'm going to put it, by the way, all in the notes below. So make sure you check it out. But what is your free gift?
Yeah, so we have an ebook called Reclaiming Fertility. And what this goes through is all of the different systems in the body that can negatively impact fertility that we commonly see in practice. And then we talk about what really is addressing those issues. So we focus a lot on toxin testing, knowing that women are exposed to a lot of toxins through personal care items, but also thinking about heavy metals and molds and doing detoxification from these things. Because part of how this all kind of has morphed over time is I didn't realize all of the toxins that I transferred to my little boy. And he got really severe eczema when he was little. And I realized that a lot of it came from me because, like you, I was the crazy person who had him at home. He was breastfed for a long time. I thought about his gut health and we still had issues with his health. And I realized that it had to do with my toxin burden that we gave to him. And so I've basically created an entire program to help prevent that from happening for other women so that they can not only conceive, but they have stellar pregnancies, they can have the birth outcome that they're looking for, and their kids are healthy. So we dive into all of that in this ebook, and it's totally free. It's a huge ebook. It's about 80 pages. We go through everything for you.
I love it. I want it, and I'm not even planning to get pregnant again. Well, I can't, but that's okay. That's a whole nother show. But anyway, this has been such a great interview. Thank you for being so vulnerable and open to this process. And I imagine that you've given people a lot to think about. And that is what this show is about, is let's all come together and be real for once. I'm sick of inauthenticity. I want us to show up as us. You are beautiful where you are right now, who you are. And it doesn't matter what anyone else has to say about that, right? It is you, authentically you. So thank you so much. I really, really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is wonderful.